Welcome to Across the Desk and our new series in partnership with CASDA, the Canadian Autism Spectrum Disorders Alliance. This series is focused on the National Autism Strategy. We hope you'll join the conversation about how this strategy can help autistic Canadians have full and equitable access to the resources they need to live a full life. The time to have this conversation is now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Across the Desk. My name is Elizabeth Plouffe, and I'm the host of the Across the Desk podcast. I am super excited to welcome Dr. Jonathan Lai, who is the Director of Operations for CASDA, to the podcast. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So we've launched a new podcast series with CASDA called Connect, Inform, Act, Sustain, which are sort of the pillars of action that CASDA is currently taking. Those four words are informing a lot of things that are happening with CASDA right now. And so, Dr. Lai, I can't really call you
Jonathan, please.
I was about to say, I know, I can't call you that with a straight face.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate to be involved with CASDA for 3 years now and have attended 2 of the in-person summit leadership events, which are phenomenal, and was fortunate to be a part of the planning committee for the first virtual event. And Jonathan came on to CASDA in 2019. And I have to tell you, once again, super impressed that Jonathan started and like 2 weeks later, we jumped into planning for this summit.
Yeah. In 2019, and then 2020 came along and we all know what happened then. So yeah.
But his ability to be so flexible and to kind of jump in and didn't have a strong event planning background as far as I'm aware, but absolutely fantastic, Jonathan. Like, it's just been crazy how much you've onboarded and started to do with CASDA. So tell us a little bit about what you do as the Director of Operations.
Sure. So a bit about CASDA and what I do. We, we're, as Elizabeth said, we are a nonprofit alliance of organizations across the country. I like to think about it as an umbrella, really. And the words you use, connect, inform, act, and sustain, is really to allow our member organizations, allow the community at large, allow the Canadian public to sustain their advocacy and their work in the autism sector. We are known for the summit. That's sort of the traditional role that CASDA has played. But now we're really building momentum. We're kind of working towards a national strategy, National Autism Strategy. And we really see that as a way to align research evidence, policy across the country, different provinces, and a practice across the country in a way that's equitable, in a way that reaches far and wide. And that's not happening right now. It's an urgent situation. Many parents, many individuals are tired. They're exhausted for advocating. It's been over a decade that CASDA has been doing this. So we're really looking forward to the government action and what's going on right now.
There was kind of so as an autism parent, so my son Thomas is 22 and he was diagnosed on the spectrum when he was 7. Sorry, it's been a while. See, tired. And so that's kind of why when I entered the autism community was for my son. And what I'm finding incredible is that CASDA has been working since, I think we said 2011.
2007 was when the Senate report, Jim Munson's report came out, and that really kicked things off. Just a bit of background on that. It's really, the government said, if you guys don't talk with one voice, we're not going to do anything. We don't know who to listen to. And it's fair from their part who you react to, right? So CASDA started with that when a few organizations came together, and it's grown now. We're over 100 member organizations and then individuals on the side. So our reach is about 800 right now.
And it's across Canada. And that was the Pay Now, Pay Later report?
Exactly. That was the 2007 report. So that's sort of what kind of got CASDA to where it is today. It's over those many years now of advocacy work.
Well, it was a fundamentally eye-opening report that brought to light how families have to struggle to piece together services and advocate. You have to, so as an autism parent, you're not just dealing with your kid on a day-to-day basis. You are also advocating with teachers, you're advocating with therapists, you're advocating with doctors, you're advocating with outside agencies. In our case, we ended up putting our son into scouting, but you have to advocate with the Scouters, and you have to advocate with any other activities that they're working with, so that you can create some understanding. And exhausting doesn't even begin to describe it. So it was thrilling last year when you shared that Prime Minister Trudeau had sort of formally acknowledged the National Autism Strategy. And tell us a little bit about that process, because I know Senator Munson has been an incredible force, and the Honorable Mike Lake, and we've had a few other senators and politicians that have been incredible supporters in getting this heard. But tell us a little bit about the process of how the National Autism Strategy got in front of Prime
Yeah.
Minister Trudeau.
So really, when I think about the strategy, there's sort of the political side, and then there's the policy side, right? So when you think about political, I'm talking about governments, different parties involved, and because of the I guess with the advocacy work, to show that there was a need specifically within the autism community, bringing some of the needs, and some of these will go into sort of other disabilities, and we can talk about that. But what happened within the autism community is getting cross-party support. So at that last election, each party was interested, committed, and then ultimately, so the 2019 election this year, and then and then now the Prime Minister did say they're going to commit to developing something. So what's happened is they've allowed Public Health Agency of Canada, FAC, to develop a consultation process and lead this. So as you know, it's been a busy time with exactly for FAC, and they've had their challenges, but really to lead a consultation process, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, with the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences, and to kind of we've had so many reports, and that's why people are exhausted. We've had the evidence. People have contributed to reports. We've asked for self advocates. We've asked for autistic Canadians to contribute to these reports as well. So there's a dime a dozen in terms of any field you're looking at: employment, housing, school supports, whatever it is. But to have this sort of formalized process by the government to do this once and do it right once, that's what we're hoping for in 2021. And so that's sort of what's going on right now in terms of the government process. They're going to have a final report released in 2022 in January. So hopefully by then there's enough in there that we can stand behind and push forward and actually implement something. Because going back to what you're saying, families, people are just exhausted. People need help, and they need supports. They need to realize they need a place that their rights are recognized, I think, as just Canadians, and that's not happening right now.
One thing I really love about CASDA is it's a living organization, in that it is not just set on a single mission and that's it. It is actively engaging with the autism community, with parents, with advocates, with agencies. And all of those conversations inform the direction that CASDA takes. It's not a single-minded, this is what we're going to do no matter what. It's, no, let's engage on as many levels as possible, whatever that looks like. So, you have to meet politicians where they are and the communication channels that are best for them. You have to meet the autism community in the same way, and parents. The open invitation at the summit is one thing that I really enjoy. It's such an incredible mix of people. Every time I go, you meet people that you never would have met otherwise. And we get people from across Canada. We had to pivot this year, and it was an almighty process to pivot and deliver virtually. Ultimately successful, which was fantastic. But again, even more people that had not been able to make it to the face-to-face were able to come in and join the conversation. And virtual is not ideal for anybody. Don't get me wrong. I've sat through 4 virtual conferences in 2020. Not great, but what we recognized as a real value add is that folks who are in rural communities or folks who can't make the travel are now able to join us on some level and be involved and be a part of that conversation. You mentioned earlier, as part of the National Autism Strategy, the focus on employment and housing, and I've got another document here that goes through all of that. Did you want to talk briefly about just a high level on some of the components that the National Autism Strategy touches on?
Yeah, so CASA has put together a blueprint, and then that was 2019, and then a roadmap to National Autism Strategy. And in those two documents, there's a nice pretty picture in the roadmap if you want a quick summary of how we saw that roll out in the beginning of 2020. But we really focused on the areas of federal jurisdiction because this is a federal strategy. We're always in conversations with them and with the provinces to talk about how we can look at provincial places, things of provincial jurisdiction, but federally. So there's housing, there's employment, there's access and affordability, there is information, and then there is research and governance. So those are the 5 areas we saw.
Well done, you.
Oh, I have poured over that.
I think you've probably seen this once or twice.
Yeah. So basically, with each of these in this past 2020, we had working groups for each of these. They met monthly, and it was an open call to the public. And these working groups formed. We worked with a research organization called Kids Brain Health Network, and some of these policy fellows will be on these podcasts talking about their work. And really, they listened to they reached out to the community. We got people together around the table and say, okay, what do we do around housing for autistic Canadians? And what are we going to do around employment? And they really came up with stakeholders from we had people with lived experience, self-advocates, we had parents, we've had service providers, clinicians, researchers, all coming to the table and really neat policy ideas coming out and recommendations that are real and on the ground. So as you mentioned, Elizabeth, like we're all about gathering the voice of the community and just bringing it forward. There's that, and we're hoping that more people participate in this way. So what we're doing actually now, because the Canadian Academy is doing this consultation process, what I was talking about the Public Health Agency earlier, we are actually taking those policy briefs, those 5 areas that we've come up with. It's about a 67-page document, really technical language for policymakers and at the Public Health Agency. It's the stuff that the policy wonks around among us.
I just made a face of pain because I love hearing about it, but when we start getting into the nitty gritty of policy, I have to tell you, I check out.
No, it's not a book that you read before bed, or maybe it is a book you read before bed.
It would be before bed. But again, we talked earlier about communication styles, right? And meeting people where they are and what's necessary, and having clear, transparent communication around what's trying to be accomplished. How many pages did you say?
It's 67 pages long. 67 pages.
But if that brief then covers all of that clearly, that then provides foundations for conversations, and nobody can say, no, you said this. You'd be like, no, look on page 62, because that's where.
So what we've done is we're actually taking that just to distill it out, and so people can use it. So there's 5 areas I mentioned, those 5, and then with the consultation process, they actually have 3 committees that are going to be working on putting the strategy together. So there's 5 areas and 3 committees. Obviously, they don't come together because 5 doesn't match with 3. So we're actually breaking up our 5 areas into the topics of the 3 committees. So people can actually go on our website. We break out those 5 areas into social, economic, and evidence-based interventions. That's how the government has framed it. So we're doing the same thing. We've taken the policy briefs. We're not changing any of the content of what stakeholders given us, and we're going to put it in those 3 areas. So you can go on our website. You can actually click on those different areas and say, okay, I want to advocate and share some of these things with the government around social inclusion. What is that going to look like?
Right.
In housing, in employment, in whatever area. You can kind of click through, pick the pieces you want that resound with you, that you feel are right, and then you can use that as a tool for your own advocacy. So that's going to be public on our website very shortly. And just a way for people and empowering our members, empowering the public to really engage with the policy process that's going on. But those are the 5 areas. There's been a lot of work that's been done with these working groups.
It's incredible.
And so
I'm just going to read. I'm going to read to the folks. There's a wonderful little one pager, 2 sides, 1 pager. So the immediate federal action, affordability and access. So some of the topics that have been listed under that for discussion are reforming the disability tax credit, build leading ASD support into federal health systems, train the next generation of ASD professionals. Thank you. Including with a new CIHR Institute, consistent recognition of ASD for medical expense tax credit, and enhance the child care expense deduction. Under information, We have decision makers, professionals, individuals, and families have access to comprehensive and credible information about autism to inform their decisions, and community services. Employers and businesses are informed to create inclusive environments. So the two main things there are build a learning network for practitioners and policymakers, and create awareness for strategies to promote inclusion for Canadians with autism. Under employment, which is the cause close to my heart, so full disclosure, I have a software company called Spiro Careers Canada, and our focus is on removing the barriers that currently exist for the autism community to access autism specific coaches and training. And that came out of personal experience. So when my son turned 18 and we went looking for help in that capacity, my go to at the time was to go to the public library. There were two resources on autism and employment.
Oh, wow.
It was so sad. It
Yeah,
was so sad.
yeah.
And I ended up getting connected to the Autism Job Club, which operates here in Burlington, Ontario. Marilyn Ellis is the founder, and she does an incredible job. But the crazy thing was that program was operating in my son's high school in his last year of high school, and we didn't know anything about it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, that's nuts. So I quickly became a volunteer and helped get some word out and what have you. So under employment, and just a quick stat, sort of a universally agreed upon statistic is that 79% of people on the spectrum are either unemployed or underemployed. 53% will never hold a full-time job for any length of time. I think the other statistic was 23% have nowhere to go. So they have no community engagement. They have no services to access to help them find employment or what have you. And those statistics, this is what the National Autism Strategy is helping to change.
Yeah, the transition age piece, just to jump in there, like,
Yeah.
kind of
Oh, it's
leaving school,
terrible.
that's a big piece where we haven't been able to figure out in terms of as a society. And we think about sort of a lifespan approach. What does that look like? And
Yeah.
not autism is a spectrum, right? So some people don't need as much support. Some people need a lot of support. So we have to make sure all voices are at the table, and what
Agreed.
that means, what that looks like. That's going to be very important for us to move forward. So everybody's heard and everybody's included in this.
100%. And we ran into huge issues with my son transitioning out of high school. And, one of the things that came up was he had always done summer courses. And of course, so going through the trajectory and the lifespan, right? So public school into high school into post secondary, you expect certain milestones and dates for graduation. And he went into his last year of high school. And so we were looking at June as his exit time. And that's what we're planning for, get ready for college and what have you. Got a call in October. Yeah. So by the way, Thomas is done.
Oh,
I was like, I'm sorry, what now? They're like, yeah. So he doesn't have to come back next semester. He's actually got too many credits and he's done. I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? We hadn't had the transition plan discussion. We hadn't, applied to any post-secondary, what have you. And I said, I'm sorry, you're going to have to find him something to do. Like, I
yeah,
don't have a plan for that.
yeah,
It was crazy. Anyway, so under employment, just to finish up this document here, better labor market information, access to pre-employment programming, ensuring federal training programs are responsive to autism, and breaking down barriers in benefit design. Under housing, invest in the creation of more housing options suitable for the needs of adults with autism, including supportive housing, and prioritize innovation in housing options that provide independence and support for people on the autism spectrum. The last piece is research. And to me, this is one of the most important things, and it's around sharing information and creating a pool where we're not spending money researching the same things because there's no central point of access for studies that have already been done and research that's been completed and validated. So complete the National Autism Surveillance System and invest in world-leading autism research. And I think that's massive. That's what can inform policy accurately, and parents can make better decisions, and our government can make better spending decisions
yeah,
on
yeah.
those 5 pillars.
Yeah, and exactly, and that was a document that was 2019, and there's an updated version, and with the policy groups, they really fleshed these things out in much more detail what it looks like. So the next series in this podcast series, These policy fellows are going to be talking into each of these areas. So if you want to learn more, that's where to go, to hear about, in an area, what is going on in Canada right now around
Mhm.
employment. How can we put an autism lens on that to make sure there's accommodations and things like that. And a lot of times, just to pick up on the employment thread, since we're talking about it so much right now, like we think about supports as almost a charity case, right? But if you
Oh,
look at the history of employment and accommodations, a lot of these things have led to so many innovative practices in our workplaces for everybody, making a more inclusive workplace. So I think that's where we have to change that. We deliver a program called Ready, Willing, and Able, and
mhm.
really it's about a business case for hiring people with autism on the spectrum, and people with intellectual disabilities, and what that and you see the data is there. It's just really showing employers, and that there is a case,
The
a
value
good business
proposition.
case. Exactly. So there's so much that we need to change as a society, and we have a lot of projects, and you'll hear about what in the rest of the podcast series that will kind of shed some light on what we're doing in those areas.
Yeah, and if you listen to the previous podcast with Jonathan, this is a redo because we had some auditory issues, and we're covering the exact same things. But we do have quite a list of talks coming up. I'm just going to pull up the list here. And so I spoke with Stephanie and Vanessa on the policy scan and the Autistic Voices project. So that's one of the things that Jonathan's referring to. Some of the topics coming up are we have policy fellows coming on to discuss research and governance, affordability and access, and specifically on employment. And then we're focusing on the autism research framework, the housing project, information gathering, and the equity and journal invitation.
Yeah. So we're actually going to be soon putting together a community journal, because we hear a lot that there's only certain voices that are at the table, and for sure, in a democracy, sometimes, especially now, where if you're on social media, you're the loudest voice. How do we make sure everybody's at the table, right? So,
Right.
really having a community journal, have some fruitful discussion, and you know really putting together a community run journal, which is run by majority of autistic editors, who are going to put together a few issues to get it started. We really want to support that, to have a fruitful conversation about equity and policy, and what that looks like in the autism community and beyond the autism community. A lot of our work, I believe, can extend in the pan disability work, groups
Agreed.
that we're in. Autism is sort of one of the forerunners, in terms of thinking about a disability plan, disability strategy, and we want to set this up right. And so that's sort of one of the initiatives that for that equity journal.
I know on a personal note, one of the things I always distinguish is that, autism is considered a disability, but that doesn't mean somebody's disabled. And it's having that conversation with employers. Sometimes it gets lumped together, and then there's that perception that it's going to be a challenge to hire somebody on the spectrum, and they go off onto all these tangents of what a disability could mean. And it can be as simple as writing instructions down versus just giving them in a conversation.
Yeah,
That
and
is,
the idea of thinking about what disability means, right? A
yeah,
lot of times we think about the person needing to change, but really thinking about the environment needing to change for the
100%.
person. So there's disabling environments, right? I think that's the switch, that we have to think about, and a lot of frameworks, rather than sort of the of sort of a biological model. Let's try to change a person's brain. Really, neurodiversity. We are all neurodivergent.
Yeah,
In a way that we are different in terms of how our brains function, and it's to the benefit of us all to include people who think differently, who
agree.
process information differently, right? So that's something, when we think about disability lens, what that means, and in the greater culture shift in thinking about how do we change the environment so it's more inclusive.
I was very fortunate. Now I have to tell you, partly because of COVID and partly because I do this all the time, my dates are a little muddled. I want to say October 2018, could be 2019 at this point.
Yeah. Who knows?
Who knows? Sometime recently, I had the opportunity to travel to Calgary, and one of CASDA's supporters is the Sneeve Foundation. And I had the opportunity to visit the Ability Hub.
Mhm.
And it was so intriguing because I expected, again, huge accommodations, right? This is an autism specific Ability Hub. You know what it came down to? Dampening noise and lowering lights.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who can't benefit from that? Because I know I have worked in, before I was an entrepreneur, I worked in medical office management for a while. One of my roles involved being the support for the head of respirology at St. Joseph's Healthcare, or the respirology residency program, sorry. And we ended up getting stuck in these little cubicles, right? So the room was that the physicians were all around the outside and had the offices where they could close the door, where they didn't spend any time, by the way. And the medical staff, I hate to call us secretaries, but medical managers, whatever, were stuck in these little like 4x4 cubicles right next to each other, and the cubicle walls didn't go to the ceiling. So now you have this level of cacophony and noise and really bright light and no way to independently adjust that for each person. And one person needed a radio going so that they could stay focused, country music. Oh, I need silence or classical music. Somebody else found it too cold. Somebody else found it too hot. Somebody else found it distracting and whatever. So this is not just an autism thing. Autism thing. This is, everybody works differently. Everybody has different ways of focusing and paying attention. And to do something so simple as to just we think it was the carpeting in the ceiling in the ability hub was done so that noise was dampened, so echo and what have you, and to reduce the lighting. I'm like, done. Like,
Yeah.
if and when we're able to go back into workspace, and that's exactly what I did in my office that I had to leave. I did everything possible to deaden noise so that you don't have that echo. And I even paid to have my lights changed so that it was an adjustable light, and I use lamps instead of whatever. So that's such a valid point, Jonathan, that this conversation brings to light that everybody requires some kind of accommodation. It's just when we attach the disability word to it that the perception is that it's a big deal, and it's not. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
So some of the ongoing work that's happening with CASDA, there's some recent publications in media that are listed here, and there's an article in the Institute for Research on Public Policy's journal, and this was about data and housing. I think you can visit the Public Policy Journal too. That should be listed on the CASDA website.
Yeah. IRPP. I think that's what the acronym is. Yeah.
Acronym happy. Learning Health System. There's an op-ed in the Hamilton Spectator. These are all available on the CASDA website if you go through the blog in the news. And then there's a collective impact poster that was done with the Children's Healthcare Canada Conference in 2020, and talking about the projects and partnerships that CASDA has been involved in over the years. And that's one of CASDA's main focuses, is to partner and collaborate as much as possible so that we have this diverse conversation going on.
Yeah, a lot of these are, if you think about CASDA, we're really trying to respond to what the emerging gaps are in policy that are actionable, like things like the learning health system. That's the idea. When you mentioned the research piece, how do we make sure research and practice and policy are better aligned? How do we rebuild the system and thinking about where research dollars are going, what topics are being covered, how that money is being funded, how is that tied into community organizations? So that's a big gap that we see to make sustainable change. We don't want this to be a one-off thing. It's not just throwing more money into a system. Money is going to be part of it, but resources has to follow strategy, right? So we want to make sure we build it right, so it's a sustainable strategy, build it so it's scalable to other disability groups as well. So there's got to be a lot of thought.
With COVID hitting the economy so deeply, and the reallocation of resources, and this is where some other gaps are being discovered, right? Is that you have folks who already have barriers around potentially transportation or requiring a certain level of support for social connection, and that's just all gone away.
Yeah. So like a crisis really just shows, if your roof was not stable, now, the rainstorm is really leaking, right? Yeah. So I think that's, we're seeing a lot of that, a lot of the mental health concerns. We did released a report. It was with McMaster and with Autism Speaks Canada, the PanCans report, early on during the pandemic, early in the spring when when lockdowns were just starting. And you're seeing, mental health, you're seeing the different supports to recreation. Some of these issues are going to be with us for a while. And I think
For sure.
we need to make sure we're aware and we're sensitive and responsive to the ongoing challenges that are
And
there.
proactive. And that's what CAS is trying to be, is that either this will spur innovation. On a personal note, Spiro started a not-for-profit called Socially ASD. 50% of our board is on the spectrum. They're informing the direction of the organization and what we're going to be doing. And we are focused on building an online platform that ultimately leads to face-to-face. That had been our goal when we started.
Yeah, yeah.
Damn you, COVID. Uh, so, we're looking at other things. We're looking at movie nights and how do we create as like a Zoom based movie night? How do we did a craft night one night just to test it out. I could
Yeah,
show you my
yeah.
snowflake. Like, it's gorgeous. And one of our members ran that whole workshop. It was fantastic. Some of the ongoing work that's happening with CASDA, and we discussed this briefly in the conversation with Vanessa and Stephanie. There's an oral health project. There is the autism employment scan. Again, personal to my heart. Environmental scan of all government employment programs in Canada that current and future autistic employees, their employers, and supporting community organizations can apply for funding or services. And part of that is recognition through our community or Canada that we are on the third generation of people on the spectrum entering the workforce. And so up until now, we haven't had a data strategy in place in order to adequately inform the spends and program development and what have you. And now we do. Now we're in the process of gathering that usable data so that we can inform this employment development and spend the government's money more effectively.
Well, it's funny. We always talk about, the scan is looking at different provinces and territories. And what's surprising, I can't wait until all that comes out, is you were seeing every region is completely different, right?
Yeah.
And there's provinces that are, we call them the haves and then the have-nots. And even within the haves provinces, Ontario is a have province, but there's issues for big
Oh,
issues
sure.
too. So it's almost like, so we joke around if, for a kid who's not yet diagnosed to a senior on the spectrum, an autistic senior, you would have to fly around to different regions depending on which sector, if you're looking at housing or employment or whatever, and the benefits are going to be different everywhere. So it's almost every few years you're going to have to go to a different place, and just to illustrate how ridiculous it is.
It's
Not to
crazy.
have standards, not to have guidelines across this. So what a national strategy will do is hopefully build a bit more of a harmonization across this. Have the federal government show a little more leadership in this way to help coordinate some of these pieces moving forward.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Some of the other things that are getting covered, the Employment Recovery Project, a joint initiative with Inclusion Canada aimed at improving workplace inclusion for autistic persons and those with intellectual disability. And this came out for me before, and I just wanted to make really clear that we are not making the assumption or the statement that everybody on the spectrum has an intellectual disability. They are two completely separate things. Um, and I try and make that statement a lot because people on the spectrum are already fighting enough. They don't need that perception around that. However, it does exist, and we need to acknowledge that and be respectful of that, that there is diversity within the autism community, and there are those with an intellectual disability, but it's not a presumption.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
it's
not everybody. I think the stats clinically is 50%. I think, but
yeah,
I think it's just in the end, when we talk about a rights-based approach, and we were at the United Nations just this past, in December,
yep,
to a few panels on that, and what that means for a rights-based approach is, approach a human being as a human being, and the
exactly.
labels sometimes will be helpful. The labels sometimes will be damaging, and to understand the context of how we view and categorize people. Some of it's affirming, some of it helps with our identity, and some things don't, right? So I think that's just an area we have to be very careful with our language. We do have a language guide, actually, as we talked about that, sort
Yeah,
of
I
how
know.
we think about autism and, and sort of that identity first piece about it for autistic Canadians. So I think there's a lot of conversation we got to have as a community to approach these things. And uh, and
One thing
informing the
about
public and from media. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just that CASDA works very hard on the education piece for all aspects. So I'm not saying that because the conversation is not happening. I'm saying thank you for making it happen, because there was a time where, I had a conversation with somebody, it was a year or two ago. Um, and I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, but I could tell something was happening to her as we were having the conversation. And without me mentioning it, as the conversation continued, I asked her at the end, I said, so something happened in that. I said, are you now assuming that people on the spectrum have an intellectual deficit? And she looked at me and she said, you know what? I did.
Yeah,
It was because the conversations have been going on for so long. All right. They're carryover from the industrial age, and they're carryover from, a place of not knowing. We are still being influenced by that lack of information. And so CASDA's role in engaging in that opportunity to educate and inform is crucial,
yeah,
is extremely crucial. The next couple of topics here are equity, research. And then podcasts are listed. So thumbs up for that. So we just wanted to check in briefly because, again, we started off talking about the Autism Leadership Summit in 2020 and the pivot that we had to take. And the feedback that we got from the attendees and from the advocates and what have you was by and large extremely positive, because it now offers a forum where people on the spectrum could be more comfortable, right? So the virtual, right? We have advocates that come out to the face-to-face and they do an incredible job. The panels that they participate on are remarkable, so informative, because there's no way for us to know. We cannot walk in their shoes. But the virtual provided an opportunity for so many more people to be included and their voices to be heard. And we just got a little message through Slack from Jonathan saying, hey, we're going to be kicking off soon.
yeah, yeah. 2021 is going to be upon us to figure out the summit and what it's going to look like. It's so unpredictable right now. It's a
I
bit of a,
know.
in
So hard.
October, what are we going to be like in October as a country? Different places, traveling, what that's going to be like, and do we go full virtual? We got to start that planning process now. But for sure, I think the content, we're the same structure. We're going to follow the same structure. Having, we had a selection committee of all autistics to help us, um, to say what's important to them, and we're going to have an open call for that again. And then also have some engagement and dialogue time during the summit, no matter what format it takes, about the learning health system pieces, about sort of priorities in the community as the National Autism Strategy is being rolled out.
Mhm.
Our next task is making sure that it's something that's robust, something that's sustainable, that will not just be a one-off document that a politician will just wave and say, "Oh, we did it," get in front of the parade because I saw a parade and say that we're done. But it's something that actually has real impact on the ground. That's what we.
100%. And that was the amazing thing, is having those committees, you know, uh, creating something in a vacuum because we think it's a good idea is very ineffective. And we are fortunate to have the autism community involved in informing, and giving us a perspective that we wouldn't otherwise have, which is an incredible thing. And, one of the things that's come up is that lack of social and a real drive to try and do a face to face. But of course, COVID's playing havoc all over the place, new strain and what have you, that it's going to be an intriguing 8 months of, trying to figure everything out. So I think we've covered all the National Autism Strategy components and what have you. And if you listen to our previous podcast, we're gonna do a piece again, because we talked earlier about the impact of mental health on everybody during COVID and how it's so important. And it's funny because this came up in a group. I run a women in entrepreneurship group, and the topic that I had proposed for our last meeting was accountability. And more interestingly, my lens on it was, how do we hold each other accountable for attaining goals or business things or what have you? What came out of the conversation was developing personal accountability around mental health, physical health, social health. You know, if you're not online, how are you getting that social interaction and what have you safely and effectively? And a few other things. And of course, stress management came up. And so it's interesting to note that Jonathan has some interesting stress relieving techniques for COVID. And
I'll just have a sip of water. See where you're going with this.
you know where I'm going with this. So as most folks have done or did before COVID hit, Jonathan has a pet.
I do. Yeah, I have a. If you were at the summit, you would have seen him in the background apparently, during one of the sessions.
Oh, do
It
we?
was live. Yeah, yeah. He was. I think it was day two. But yeah, so Tigger, our cat, 7-year-old cat, is live and well, and like the most dog-like cat there is. But he's been fun. He's fun. It's fun to have around for sure.
But I mean, they're handy. Like we have a dog, and poor Brandy at the beginning of COVID was just like, "You people need to leave me alone." Like I don't know. Like after a couple of months, she was like, "I am done with you." And my daughter, uses the dog as her like anxiety pet, if you will. So that dog, I tell you, if hugs can keep a pet alive, that dog is never going to die. Um, yeah, but so other than being a doctor, Jonathan's also a cat whisperer.
Yes.
And apparently,
My wife calls me that. So when we got our kid, we got Tigger as a kitten from the shelter, a foster care program, I guess it was. We taught him to sit and paw and come and look. So he
that's
knows all the dog
fantastic.
tricks. My background was in neuroscience, so I did do like a lot of animal behavior stuff. Before I
Right.
got to sort of the policy side of things in my PhD for my PhD, and I guess it kind of came with my nature to kind of understand animals and behavior, I guess. So, anyways, that's who he is.
Any new tricks during COVID, or you've just stuck with that?
No, we've actually tried the rollover, but that's a little difficult
Ooh.
because to get him to fall, you got to push him the first time. So
Oh,
every time I say roll over, at first he pushes me back, so he actually doesn't fall over. He just comes to my hand and pushes. So, anyways, I haven't figured that out. I think he's a little too old right now to learn that one, but
hey, we all talk about neuroplasticity and all that good stuff. I'm sure that applies to cats as well.
yeah,
Don't be
maybe
judgy.
he needs the exercise to get that neuroplasticity going, which
That's
is another
perfect.
topic. Okay.
Another topic, but another stress reliever that Jonathan's using is he's teaching violin online, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
music is an incredible therapy. I was actually just singing before we came on. I looked up some
Ah,
alto. Yeah, I tend to sing Disney.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I'm also in altos, and a lot of Disney is sung in soprano or high soprano, which not reaching that anytime soon.
yeah.
But that's so therapeutic, right? Is
Yeah, yeah. So that's just something I did growing up was the music scene. I played piano, violin, and some just had a whole not a career in that, but and it's just something that based on all the work I'm doing now, the policy
mm,
work, it's heavy stuff. So being able to sort of connect in a different way, use a different part of my brain. I think it's nice. It's nice
100%.
to switch that up. Yeah.
And that was one of the things we were talking about is mental health accountability is not just watching your sadness and depression, but making sure that if you are in a job, for an example, that is heavy left brain, very logic oriented and strategy oriented, that you don't ignore the fact that the right side of your brain requires some creative um, stimulation,
Yeah.
whether that's reading or singing or playing the violin. And for Jonathan, he does one final thing that we'll talk about because there is a human team at CASDA. There is a team of amazing, incredibly diverse people who are working tirelessly and have some interests. And so he engages his right brain in a unique way, which frustrates his wife to no end because he creates these incredible dinners, but they're one-offs.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things I like to do, it's almost a personal challenge. After the workday, now, the commute's not too long. I go over to the kitchen and I like just look in the fridge and figure out what I can make. Kind of cooking creations and put up some good music and just cook away. And it's more of it's a creative hobby, and it could taste fabulous or it could be a disaster. But it's if it's fabulous, oh, can we do that again?
No
No idea
idea.
how I did that, or won't be able to replicate it. But it's something I find as a challenge to get a few stoves going. It's great.
That's an amazing thing, right? And that's one of the things, again, to link it back to CASDA, that there's all kinds of resources and recommendations around managing a variety of situations. And it's recognized that, mental health is a higher risk within the autism community. And that's one of the reasons CASDA is so focused on an autism specific national strategy, is that autism presents some unique challenges that deserves its own attention. And it's not that, we're not cognizant of other disabilities and what have you, but autism has some unique things that need to be resolved in specific ways. So just like Jonathan handles his mental health during this crisis, and I'm guessing, all year, through, Tigger and jazz and music online, we're here to say that, yeah, everybody needs to come up with some ways of handling this. And whether it's discovered and delivered through the National Autism Strategy, through suggestions of folks in the autism community who are managing it their own way.
And the point, there is no one size fits all in terms of mental
Absolutely
health.
not.
There's no one size fits all in terms of, an autistic person. So we have to be able to have that flexibility, and, and I think that's sort of the cross-cutting theme in a lot of these conversations.
And that's sort of it's starting to roll down our wrap up our podcast, but it also opens up the invitation to please join the conversation, because please don't assume that how you're handling your situation is how everybody's handling your situation. And there may be somebody who is struggling accessing services, or struggling with their mental health, or something else to do with their autism diagnosis. And your solution may be the thing that they've been looking for. So there is value in you sharing. There is value in you getting involved. And even if it is something that somebody else is already doing, perhaps it gets presented in a way that it finally makes sense to somebody, and they onboard that and make a positive change. So thank you, Dr. Lai, for coming.
Please. Not again. Don't ever use it's way too much.
Please don't do that.
Yeah.
If you're looking for more information about the National Autism Strategy and the events and happenings for CASDA, please visit CASDA.ca. We are also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram with CASDA.ca. You can access all of that through the website. The team has done an amazing job of collaborating with a variety of agencies and organizations to pull together some great resources. The different things that happen come out in the news. There's Taking Action. There's the COVID-19 guide. Please visit. And it's an opportunity to get in touch. I think it's info@casda.ca. If you've got questions that came out of listening to this podcast, it is manned. You will get a response, and we want to hear from you.
Great.
So I think
that's all for me.
That's all. We're done. So thank you for joining us, everybody. We appreciate it. We will be talking to you soon. Our next podcast is going to be with Brittany. She is a policy fellow who will be discussing affordability and access. That will be coming up at the end of January. I think we've got somebody in between, but we've had some dates getting rearranged. So Brittany's probably the next voice you're going to get to hear. Thank you very much for joining me, Jonathan.
No problem. Love to be here.
Yeah, and we're going to see you again in February, I believe, or February, March.
I guess so. Yeah, I think there'd be more of an update about some of the projects going on then. So it'd be good to keep in touch.
Yay. Yay. All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining the conversation about the National Autism Strategy. CASDA is a comprehensive network of autistic Canadians and autism-focused organizations. Our members are united by the shared vision that a national autism strategy will create improvements in the lives of autistic people for generations to come. Please visit CASDA.ca to learn more and keep the conversation going.